So you will never hear a faith story journey without some amazing, out of the blue, didn't sign up for this kind of circumstance. You probably don't ever want to go through those circumstances again. You don't wish them on anybody to go through, but yet it's like God did something in the middle of that. Like he turned it around and it now became a defining moment in your life. It's also a time where often God seems so far away, where God doesn't seem so close. You can't hear him, you can't feel him, you just feel like he's not there. But yet when you look back on the situation, you can often see that he was really every step of the way right there with you. We call these defining moments pivotal circumstances, and the amazing thing is that they can be positive or negative. You've probably heard stories, one gentleman mentioned it here at least, where someone goes off to be a missionary somewhere, or they go on a missions trip, and God just rocks their world, and all of a sudden they see things in a totally different way. Or somebody has a child for the first time, and just the miracle of birth changes them. But most times, pivotal circumstances will be the negative moments. They are things that just come out of the blue. They're the phone call or the information that you didn't expect to get. And suddenly we're faced with this circumstance that's just bigger than life. All of a sudden it feels like the whole world is crashing down on you. You don't know what to do. You don't know where to go. And it's in those moments that God is often introduced or even reintroduced back into our lives. And suddenly for the first time, most of us, for the very first time, will be down on our knees crying out to God. And all of a sudden, we invite God in this whole new way, this whole completely different level. I think C.S. Lewis said it really well in his book called The Problem of Pain. And he writes, God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks to us in our conscience, but shouts in our pains. It's his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. Almost like God is trying to get our attention, right? Like he's screaming out to us, saying, wake up and listen. And I think there's this undeniable relationship between those kind of pivotal circumstances and our faith in God. It's something that God has leveraged from the very beginning of time. In fact, James, the brother of Jesus, he was in the middle of everything that was going on with Jesus. He was there in the middle of that when he died, when he rose from the dead. He was right in the middle of it. And he describes the relationship like this. He says, consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance. Perseverance must finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. So in other words, James is saying that it's not accidental. It's not accidental that Christians, non-Christians, people in general face these kind of overwhelming circumstances. It's not accidental that in the middle of those circumstances, something begins to happen. Something begins to change in us in our faith in God. A determined, persevering faith is what happens. And so we have to let it finish, right? We have to keep going and let perseverance finish its work. In other words, God is up to something big. He is up to something big, even in those pivotal circumstances. I really don't believe that God causes those circumstances. Yes, will God let us go through them? You absolutely bet he will. He will let us go through them because they are one of the primary things that God uses to build and to strengthen and to grow our faith. So I think a great illustration of this comes from a story that most of you probably are very well aware of, very familiar with. In fact, when I read this story, a lot of you are going to go, oh yeah, I already know the end of that story. But what I want you to do today is I want you to just slow down, and I want you to really hear the story. I want you to put yourself in the story with the characters. Because here's a situation where Jesus isn't just leveraging a pivotal circumstance or a situation to make it a pivotal circumstance. Jesus is actually creating a negative circumstance in this story. And he's doing this in order to build at least one person or 12 people, but obviously more ends up happening. But he does this to grow someone's faith. And I want you to listen to this familiar story with that kind of idea. So it comes from John chapter 11, and this is how the story starts. Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Now, I want to tell you first, before I get any further, that these three people are very close friends of Jesus. Jesus has ate at their house. They have supported Jesus in many, many different ways. They are all friends. And so these sisters, when their brother becomes sick, what's the natural thing they're going to go do, right? They're going to go find Jesus and ask him to come heal their brother. So the sisters send word to Jesus. Look, the one you love is sick. I want you to look closely at this. It does not say Lazarus is sick. It's the one you love is sick. Now that tells us something. They first off knew that automatically when the sisters sent the message, that's all they needed to say, because if the message was from Mary and Martha, that meant it was about Lazarus, right? They had this close relationship with Jesus, so close that Jesus could simply just tell who they were talking to by describing Lazarus this way. Now, Jesus has healed many, many, many people, right? He's healed many, many strangers, people he only ever saw once, or people he never even saw. He healed people that were all over the place, and in some cases, he healed people just by speaking one word, one word. So, of course, these sisters are going to go to their friend Jesus and ask him to heal their brother. So it goes on. When he heard this, Jesus said, "This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." Now, I want to stop here for a moment and tell you that Jesus is really introducing something new here. This is a new concept at this time. We get it today. We've seen it lots of times, or we hear it lots of times. But for the first time, the disciples are hearing this in a new way. Basically, what Jesus is saying is that sickness, illness, death, all of that can be for God's glory. This is not like the times where maybe we get an award at our jobs and we get the chance to stand up in front of our coworkers and we say something like, "Oh, I want to just give God all the glory. Without him, I wouldn't have had the strength to be able to do this kind of job." That's all nice and dandy, but there's another kind of glory that's even better, something that's even way more effective. It's where something really, really negative is introduced into your life, and God says, "I'm going to allow that to happen. I'm going to leverage that for my glory." Now remember, John is the one writing this. We're in the book of John. This is the book he wrote. He was right in the middle of all of this, so he knew exactly what was happening. And he says, now Jesus loved Mary and her sister and Lazarus. This is very important to know, because what we see here, what John is actually trying to tell us, is that there is a different kind of relationship with this family. This isn't just some new family that Jesus happened to come across. It isn't just somebody who's reaching out who's never met him. This is a special relationship. He knows their names. He's been in their house. They've supported him. They love each other very deeply. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. Okay, just wait a minute, right? That just turns the story all around. That makes absolutely no sense. If he knows these people so well, if he loves them so much, why in the world would he choose to stay where he is for 2 more days, knowing that his friend is suffering, that his friend is dying? Everything about this is wrong. And this is why I have to say that I absolutely believe 110% that Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, that they are all stories of truth. They're stories of Jesus' life, the story of his words, his events. Because of this story alone, I can say I believe that. Because if you were going to write this story, if you were going to write a fictional story, let's just put it that way, you would not write it like this. No way would you write it like this. You wouldn't want people to hear it this way, because you're trying to make people see who Jesus is, right? And to love him and to follow him. You wouldn't write it this way. Everything about this is wrong. Jesus gets word that not just anybody is sick, but a friend that he deeply loves is sick and is dying, and he stays put. I wonder how many of us can say in this room that we have felt like that ourselves, where maybe we've called out for God. God, I need your help. I'm in a lot of pain, right? And nothing. God, I need a job. I'm desperate. I need to make money. And nothing. I don't think God just is ignoring you, of course, but for whatever reason, he's making you wait for that answer. That's between you and him, of course. But we have all felt like that, where God just isn't listening. He's not answering our prayers. We're saying, God, I'm going to go to church every Sunday if you just do this, right? I'll do whatever you want if you just do this. And still, absolutely nothing. And then after 2 days of nothing, 2 days while Mary and Martha suffered, 2 days while Mary and Martha watched their brother die. Can you put yourself in their shoes? While they watched their brother suffer and die, they asked everybody who was coming from that direction, hey, did you see Jesus yet? Have you seen him? We sent the messenger. We know that he got the message. The messengers come back. They told us, they told him. But still, we haven't seen Jesus. And then slowly, they watched their brother die, which sounds absolutely terrible. But after 2 days, Jesus finally says, then he said to his disciples, let us go back to Judea. Now, there's something important here you need to look at too. It sounds really simple, but what really is going on here is that the town of Bethany, where Lazarus and his sisters live, is in the region of Judea. And the disciples and Jesus were just in Judea just a few days before this. And they were threatened. In fact, Jesus was threatened to be stoned to death. So the disciples answer like this, "But Rabbi, only a few days ago the people in Judea tried to stone you, and yet you are going back there?" Like, why would you want to go back there? The disciples are really good at refreshing Jesus' memory, of course, and they're like, don't you remember what happened? These guys wanted to stone you, and if we're with you and we're your followers, and they're probably going to want to stone us too, and we really don't feel like being stoned, so can we just stay right here, you know? But now, I got to say, you also have to remember that these are the guys who we call the heroes of faith, right? These are the saints. These are the people we name our kids after. And now they're thinking, well, I just kind of like that idea of just sitting right here. Let's just wait here. Hey, remember how you did that wirelessly thing where you healed somebody and when you weren't even in their presence? Can we just do that again? Can that just happen again? And then Jesus gives a little lesson here, which I'm not going to get into for a couple of verses. I'll teach that another time. But at the end of that verse, or end of this section, I love it because I think it's kind of funny, actually. The disciples pretty much just give up. They're like, all right, fine. Jesus says we're going to go. I guess we're just going to have to go. And there's dear Thomas, who now is ready to be a martyr. Okay, let's go die with Jesus. Like he just knows Jesus is going to die if they go to Judea. So it continues. After he had said this, he went on to tell them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to wake him up. His disciples replied, Lord, if he sleeps, he will get better. Oh, this is good news. I don't know how Jesus knows this, but he's just sleeping. This is great. If he's sleeping, that means his fever's broke, he's calm, he's relaxing. So we don't need to go, Jesus. But Jesus is like, guys, no. Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So then he told them plainly, Lazarus is dead. Now I imagine a lot of confusion at this point in the disciples' mind. I can imagine them asking, so if you knew he was dying, if you knew that he was dead, then why did we just sit here for 2 days and do absolutely nothing? Or why didn't you at least do that wirelessly thing? You know, why couldn't you have at least just spoke a word and he would have been healed? But you got to listen to this next verse. Here comes the reason. And for your sake, I'm glad I was not there, so that you may believe, but let us go to him. Which I want to say, but what about for Lazarus' sake? What about for Mary or Martha's sake, right? But we've got to get deeper into this. This piece is really huge here. Jesus looks at his 12 disciples, whom he's going to hand this whole thing off to here in just a little while. The guys who are kind of scared all the time, the guys who are brave in one moment and fearful in another, the same guys who deny him a little bit later. And he says, for your sake, for the 12 of you, for your sake, I'm glad I wasn't there. And I'm glad he died. And I'm glad Mary and Martha have suffered and watched their brother die. I'm glad that they're disappointed in me. I'm glad that there's this whole mystery over this whole thing. I'm glad for the Jews that are around Mary and Martha right now saying, see, I told you Jesus wouldn't show up. See, I told you he's not who he says he is. And I'm willing for the one I love and for the people I love to have a broken heart. I'm glad for all of that because I have something so big, so major that I want you to learn. And that's how important this lesson is that I am about to teach you. There's this little Greek word that's translated into 2 English words, so that. And the word is henna. It's called a henna clause. And just this one little Greek word, henna, which means now I'm going to give you the reason. Now I'm going to show you the purpose behind all of this. Now I'm going to let you in and know what's really going on. You want to know why I'm glad I'm not there? You want to know why we stayed right here where we are and Mary and Martha's hearts are broken? It's for your sake. For your sake, I am glad I was not there so that you may, what's the word? Believe. So that you may believe. Another reason why I think this has all happened is this is just way too severe, way too severe. This is total opposition to everything we want to believe about God. So Jesus allowed someone that he knew personally, someone that he loved to die. He allowed his sisters to sit there and watch him die, knowing that they have a friend not that far away who could totally heal him and could totally save him, but yet they sat there and watched him die. Now, don't get me wrong. I really do believe that this benefits Martha later. This whole situation benefits all the people that were there. It benefits us today. But right now, from the disciples' focus, they had to be asking, is all of this really worth whatever it is that you're trying to teach us? Is it really all worth it? But Jesus is like, yeah, I set this whole thing up. I planned this whole thing so that you could learn to have bold, audacious faith that would just stand out above and never be shaken. And we skip down to verse 21. And Martha sees Jesus coming down the road days later. And she comes running to Jesus. And she says what you and I believe that you and I would have said. She says to Jesus what I believe you and I have probably already said many times to Jesus. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Basically, Jesus, it's your fault. It's your fault my brother is dead. I have seen you heal strangers. I have seen you heal people who were not even in your presence. I remember that Roman centurion who represent a government that we absolutely despise, yet when he came calling, you healed his servant. You didn't know his servant's name. You didn't know the Roman's name, but you went and healed his servant anyways. And here is your friend. Why wouldn't you come and heal your friend? Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. If you had been here, I wouldn't have had to watch him die. If you had been here, I wouldn't have had to hear the people around me ridicule us and scorn us, reminding us, trying to say, hey, Jesus is not who you really think he is. Jesus, it's worse than simply watching him die. I had to watch him die knowing that you could save him, and you didn't. You weren't here. And verse 22 is absolutely amazing. This is still Martha speaking. But I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask. Which means, I know, meaning I trust you, I have confidence in you, I have faith in you. I know that even now, if you ask God, God will give you whatever you ask of him. This is so amazing to me because here she is standing in front of Jesus, face to face with Jesus, and she's saying, I've watched you. I've watched you. Here's what I know. Here's what I believe. As broken as my heart is, as angry as I am with you, I know that if you ask God right now, it can still happen. And Jesus says to her, your brother will rise again. And she's thinking, oh yeah, sure, I know Jesus, I know. And she digs into her theology and she pulls out something that every Jew believed. And she says, I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day, right? I know, Jesus, you're trying to comfort me. It's all going to be all right. This is what we all say at funerals, right? You know, it's going to be okay. They're with God now. They're going to rise again on the resurrection, the day of resurrection. But Jesus, could you have just kept this from happening? Could you have just kept this from happening? It's not that I don't believe that we're not going to resurrect, and Jesus tells her, I am the resurrection and the life. And here he comes with this deep theology right now. He's throwing this into the drama, into the situation. I am the resurrection and the life. Jesus is basically saying, yeah, you're right. God would give me whatever I ask of him, but it's bigger than that, Martha. You're right, I'm a teacher here from God, but it's bigger than that. You're right, I am a miracle worker and I could have saved your brother, but it's bigger than that. It's so big and it's so important, so relevant to who I am. It's so important for people who will live hundreds and thousands of years later to know this. It's bigger than that, Martha. I am personally, the resurrection. I am the resurrection and the life. Now, folks, you don't make a statement like that without backing it up. You just don't. And that's what this moment is all about. Who is Jesus? Who really is he? Jesus made this claim that he had not made up until this point. He's now the resurrection, he's telling us, and the life. And he says, he who believes in me will live, even though he dies. And whoever lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? Do you believe this? There's actually not a Greek word for the word trust. There's just Greek word that covers, it's one word that covers both belief and faith. And so when John wrote this, he knew that it was bigger. It was bigger than just belief. There was more behind that word belief. There's this confidence, this full faith, this full trust. And so he combines this little Greek word with a little preposition, just the word in, and he says believes in. Believes in. When you put them together now in Greek, now that means trust. Trust. So this is John's way of saying trust. Jesus says, anyone who trusts me or puts his trust in me will live even though he dies. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. And this is where it benefits Martha, but this is also where it benefits us. Do you believe this? Do you believe this? Do you trust me? In other words. He wants Martha to believe it. He wants Martha to have more trust in him. He wants that from all of us. And this is all about faith, all about faith. This is all about confidence in Jesus, because your faith and my faith, all of our faith is so, so important to our God. So she says, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who was to come into the world, right? I picture her when she says this, yes, Lord, and then sort of takes this deep breath to be able to say the rest of it. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God. And with tears in her eyes, I can hear her saying, I believe, even though my brother died, even though you left him die. I believe that even though you didn't come. I believe that even though you didn't answer my prayer, even though I had to be ridiculed by our neighbors and all of this. I don't have much, though, to hang that belief on right now. But she is saying, yes, I do believe. And then Jesus asked to be taken to the grave. And so he goes. Mary is now there. All these mourners are around him. All these people are there together. And we have the shortest verse, the shortest piece of scripture in the entire Bible come next. You know what it is? Some of you do. I see you whispering. Jesus wept. Verse 35, John 11:35, Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, see how he loved him. I love this verse because this is the clash. This is where it all comes together. Here's the world we live in. Jesus who can perform miracles. Jesus who is the resurrection and life. Jesus who knows what he's about to do. Instead of just rushing in and doing the next miracle, he just pauses. He pauses and takes it all in because he has a heart too. And he feels. And he feels. He pauses to feel exactly what Mary and Martha had been feeling, exactly what you feel when you bury a loved one, exactly what you have felt when God didn't come through for you, exactly what you have felt when your kids didn't turn out the way that you thought they would, exactly how all of us have felt. Jesus relates to it. And we say, God, we believe, we trust you, but you're not doing anything. But we do still believe. And Jesus just pauses and sort of takes that in. And it's as if he's saying, you know what, I understand. I understand how that feels to wait. I understand how that feels to mourn. And then he said to Mary and Martha, he said, have your servants remove that stone. Have them remove that stone. And now Lazarus, I want you to remind you that he's in a cave, much like Jesus had been in or would be in shortly after this. But he's like, remove that stone from there. And Martha's, of course, going, oh, no, Jesus. Have you really not been paying attention? You just need to wait a moment because this is not going to be good. In the King James version, not the New King James, but in the King James, if you go back to the old version, I think it's kind of comical because it says, Mary basically says to him, but Lord, by this time, he stinketh. He stinketh. Yes, Martha, by this time, 4 days later, he is going to stinketh. No matter what, he is going to stinketh. But Jesus said, move the stone. So they do roll away the stone, but I see some push and pull and drama here going. You know, Martha, Mary, maybe others are going, no. We don't want to be near this when you open that, right? We don't want to have anything to do with that. People are questioning what he's doing. And then Jesus does the strangest thing. And I think he does this for their purpose, but also for the rest of us. He does this strange thing where John describes it as he looks up to heaven and he says this, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may, here the word is again, believe that you sent me, that you sent me. So in other words, I'm praying so that everyone around here will know that you and I have this special connection. There's something here because I'm not doing this for my will. I want them to know that I'm not doing this somehow miraculously on my own, but that I am here specifically doing your will, and you have given me the power over death. That's how big it is. And he said, Lazarus, come forth. Lazarus, come forth. And Lazarus came out of the tomb, well alive, wrapped still in his garments, and of course they unwrap him and everything. And if there was ever a doubt in anyone's mind standing there in that moment about who Jesus was, I would love to think that hopefully it was squashed. If there was ever a doubt in our mind, if you're putting yourselves in this story right now, hopefully that doubt is squashed. And it ends like this. Therefore, many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary and had seen what Jesus did believed in him. Believed in him. Jesus didn't simply leverage a painful situation. Jesus created it. Jesus created it in order to show connection between pivotal circumstances and our faith. You can choose to let these kind of moments either pull you away from God, or you can let these moments be used by God. And I would tell you, the differences between leaning towards God and leaning away from God in these kind of moments? It usually has to do with where you put yourself. And I mean that by like right here in this body. The people you surround yourself with will be the people who help you to determine if you're going to lean away from God or if you're going to lean into God in these kind of moments, because we all need this. We all need this framework where people help us to see it from a different perspective or help us to see it a little bit differently. Not people who are trying to smooth it over and, oh, it's okay, whatever, trying to make God look good again. That's not the goal, right? That's not the goal. We do this together because we want to try to help each other. Everybody in here has some kind of testimony, and I can guarantee you there's somebody else in this room that your testimony would benefit. All of us in here need that kind of framework. We need other people to support us and help us to see a different perspective, especially in those kind of moments. But separate from a community like this, separate from insight and testimonies, the same pain that can grow your faith is the same pain that can absolutely destroy it. Absolutely destroy it. And there's only one thing worse than disappointment with God, and that's disappointment without God. All of us at moments and times in our lives are going to be disappointed with God. That's just factual. We're going to be disappointed with him, but you can be disappointed with God still in the same context of trusting him, knowing and believing who he is and what he's going to do. And so the best advice I could give you as we end this series, as we end this message today, is simply this. If you are in the middle of one of these kind of pivotal circumstances, if you are in the middle of one of those, I don't know where to turn, I don't know where I'm going to get the answers, I'm almost to the point of despair, none of it matters anymore, you're just about ready to lose it all, you're ready to give up on God. If you are there in this moment right now, my best advice to you is this. It's real simple, but add this to your prayers. If you're praying, God heal me, God heal him, God heal her, whatever your prayer is, just add this one small part. God, I need to see you in this. God, I need to see you in this. I'm not asking you to change everything. I'm going to trust you, right? I want your will to be done, not mine, but I've got to see you in this. If I can see you in this, then I know there's hope. If I can see you in this, then I know there's an end. If I can see you in this, then I know there is grace to be sustained, because at the end of the day, I really want my faith to be grown. I don't want it to go smaller. I don't want to lose my faith. In the end of the day, I really want to have my faith grown. But God, I don't know how in the world that's going to be possible if you don't show me that you're in this situation right now. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. And your suffering and your pain and the bumps along the road really are not just exceptions. They are part of your story. They are there for a reason. They are part of your story. And Jesus makes it very clear that these are important parts of your story. They're not just there for the fun of it. They're not just a little teeny lesson. These are the life-defining moments that switch and turn you around to face God and have more trust and faith in him. And just as your heavenly Father leveraged the greatest crime of all history, Jesus dying on that cross, being crucified for us, just as he leveraged that to build our faith, to give us salvation, to show us the fact that God absolutely loves us, in that same way, if you let him, God will leverage your deepest pain, your darkest hours, your deepest valleys, because God has chosen to use those pivotal circumstances to grow our faith in him. And fortunately, this is a good thing. We don't get to choose those pivotal circumstances. We don't get to choose. God does all that. He does the using. But our responsibility is how we respond to them. How we respond to them, because our faith is extraordinarily, I can't say it enough, our faith is important to God. To God. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we don't always understand your ways. We certainly sometimes feel like you're not here, like you're not listening, like you're not really a part of it. But yet, God, we're still going to trust you. Even in those moments, we want to trust you. We do want our faith to be grown. But as we wait for you, surround us with the right people. Surround us with our church family who will give us that support and love and help us to see it in a different perspective. Show us the hope that we can believe in. Show us that you are really involved in it, Lord, that you are really right there. We love you, God. We trust you. We want to have full confidence in you, but just show us that you are right here, right now, and no matter what's going on in our lives. And as you do, Father, let that be the moment that our faith really takes a turn and starts to really grow big. In Jesus' precious name we pray. Amen.